All right. Here they come.
I am not Eleanor. That is my
Yeah,
daughter.
I was gonna say, Eleanor, welcome.
Not sure when she was on, but okay.
Now, is that a daughter?
Yeah.
Wife? Okay.
That's my daughter. She's off at college, so I'm a little confused how that got on there.
She used your account somehow.
Yeah.
Are you charging her? Are you charging her a subscription or?
No. She's
Or you
got
get back?
she's got her own from college, so
Mhm.
everyone has them now. Oh, I'm not signed in, so it went to hers by default. Sorry, everyone.
Okay, got it. Got it. Well, we just want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. And I just want to comment that this is a special day today for a lot of reasons, but the greatest of them being that this is Earth Day. And so I took my granddaughter off to school and she had her Earth Day t-shirt on. I have my little one here too called Feeding Human Progress. This is Land O'Lakes, one of their brands. So just want to welcome you on this beautiful Earth Day. So we're going to get things started. This is our 5th session of the 21-22 academic year. Leslie and I were sort of like, where did all the time go? It goes so fast every year, as we all know. And then it's largely because we're as busy as we all are, right? And we're grateful that you want to be busy with this work. So thank you so much for coming to our DevEd ABE Affinity Group session. And with that, it would be great if everybody, isn't Earth Day tomorrow? Well, it might be, Julie. You're absolutely probably correct. My granddaughter goes to a school where she's not in session on Friday, so she probably wanted to express it today. So thanks, Julie, for clearing that up. Isn't it Earth Day every day? It should be, right? That's my way out of that one. So with that, we're going to have you introduce yourself as we usually do, your name, your role, your organization, and then Leslie, if you could get us started, that would be great.
We all bailed, a couple of us bailed you out there, Russ.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you.
Well, hi, everybody. It's good to see your faces. And on this, actually, we're in the Twin Cities. We have a wonderful 50-some degree, 51 or 2 degrees. So what couldn't be nicer right now for those of us who are enjoying the good weather? Anyway, welcome. You know, I always do kind of the brief agenda. Russ and I have been very, very busy this year working with a variety of different people and groups and state agencies. And so we realize it's kind of our one-way send to this group about what we've been doing and what we have in store for next year. And we've got some exciting updates that include funding topics. But we also want to leave a fair amount of time for you all to be able to talk. Russ has a couple questions he'll lead you through, and then we'll see if you have other topics. We don't always want these sessions to be, presentations. We think of it as your group and your chance to be able to participate. But we hope that the work that we're doing, Russ and I chatted about this before the meeting. We hope that, I said, we're interested in the work we're doing. And it is for the partnership effort, but I hope the participants are equally as interested because it's kind of the details of what we're doing. But if you see anything along the way or, you want to make any comments, feel free to type in the chat because we hope that this work is for the benefit of everyone. And it really did come out of the Affinity group to begin with. So there you go. Okay, So I see some of the intros are coming in. Yeah, so whoops, nope, we're there. Okay. So this year, through intentional engagement, I mean, we did it both years, last year and this year. Russ and I had intentional engagement with Minnesota State, the system office folks, as you know, in the P20 system, and those responsible or overseeing DevEd sort of outcomes for the system, and with MDE. And we've always been delighted that the MDE folks are a couple, the Julie Astrid, Julie.
I wasn't expecting to spend $1,400. You know what I mean?
Right. Holy
What?
cow.
Is that someone talking on their own?
That's where I say I kind of feel like I got.
Russ, was that someone participating in this conversation or?
Yes, and they've been muted.
Oh, okay. So we'll find out. Anyway, the exciting update is, remember we said we applied for the innovation funding at Minnesota State. And last year we were not awarded it. This year we were. It's a small seed grant as opposed to their large Shark Tank $20,000. When Russ and I put our sort of desired work plan for next year, like what all could we do to make the greatest impact in the next year, following up with the toolkit, right, from last year, we put together essentially about a $25,000 proposal. And we weren't exactly sure if the Northwest region would, well, we knew that would exceed what they could fund, because I think they've been funding far less than that, but we've been able to do a lot with what they funded. In any case, we did get the 10,000, and then MDE asked us, to submit a proposal for our work for next year and also for the rest of this year. And so we had several different discussions, and a big shout out. I think both Julie and Astrid are here today. We want to do a great big shout out. Essentially, we're calling it a match of Minnesota State. And so that funded 20,000 of it. And yes, we absolutely should give them a round of applause. They've been so invested in this. And their rationale, and I invite them to say a few words, is that the work that we've been doing while funded from the Northwest region has really grown in scale to be a statewide endeavor. And we're even getting some national interest in our work here. And I shouldn't say our work, in the work that Minnesota is doing in terms of these partnerships. NROC, for example, sees Minnesota as taking the lead in these partnerships, and is just loving the presentations from the people who are actually doing the work. So Julie or Astrid, did you want to say anything? They typed in here. We're excited to support the important work, but would you like to add anything, Julie or Astrid? I'll talk about what the work will involve in a few minutes.
No, I'm just glad that the work continues to move forward and that there's a group of people that are interested in this and engaged in it and are willing to continue participating in it. So, and thank you to Russ and Leslie for supporting it and moving it forward.
Well, great. All right. Well, thanks again. And so obviously it will allow us to do significantly more in the next year. Now on the national radar, NROC in particular, and one of the members or one of the directors at NROC has served on this affinity group, and that's Terry Rowenhorst. I don't know if she comes to the first of the two meetings or the second typically, but she's the one who's saying, we love what I'm hearing, from Minnesota. And so we did a presentation on this work at the November session, and we had some folks from campuses also be there, campus and ABE staff, the partnership together. And then last week, or about 2 weeks ago, Terry asked if we could help sort of behind the scenes, and they funded it, coordinate a workshop for COAB. And there were 3 Minnesota partnerships there. It was in person. They were panelists. I was online, just remotely watching it. And I'm going to come back, but here they are. So our very own Minnesota folks, Penny Yankee, I won't go through all of their titles. Penny Yankee, ABE coordinator, Christy Rooney, also ABE, Jody Greninger for the adult ed, and several of these people, by the way, are on the Affinity group. Sarah Bustrom, math faculty, and Patrick Hobart with ABE. So they did a wonderful job, and the audience really appreciated it. There were about 15 or 20 people. It was a Sunday afternoon pre-conference workshop, so it wasn't expected to get that many people, but 15 people did show up to attend and gave them a round of applause. So thank you for that. Finally, Russ and I were contacted by Octave, and they have an event in May, and we're still discussing what it would look like, even though it's coming up shortly. I think she was talking about maybe doing a 30-minute presentation one day or something, but then doing an asynchronous, some kind of asynchronous thing where we answer questions. So we still have to finalize what the details look like, but needless to say, it's on the national radar. I'm going to stop there just to see what I'm going to do next is talk to you about what are our plans for spending this $20,000 plus a request going into the Northwest region, actually. So we're up to about 24,000. But let me just stop on the national updates. Any comments, thoughts there? I want to make sure I don't just keep talking.
Well, just a comment about Octave, and that's the, national education level. And so I think that's the Office on Career and Technical Education. Is that correct, Julie? Do I have that correct?
Yep, Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education.
Yeah, thank you for adding the adult portion of that.
Yep.
Thank you. That makes great sense. So this is
And do
quite
you
the
know how they
honor.
found out about this work, Russ? I can't remember.
I think it was through Astrid, actually. Is that correct, Astrid?
I'm not sure. The May event, Russ?
Well, it was Tracy. It was a person I think that you either introduced us to or because she dropped your name.
Oh.
So from what I can
Is
remember.
this for the links discussion?
Yes. The links
Okay.
discussion.
Yes. Now I'm making the connection. Yes. She is one of the facilitators. She's the adult ed state director in Illinois and one of the facilitators for the links community.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for that connection.
Bear in mind, the toolkit is getting around, and the notion that Minnesota is partnering and sort of how to is impacting people beyond the state of Minnesota. So we're thrilled about that. Okay, so moving on. Well, more updates, I guess. I'm not quite ready for the discussion about next year. The toolkit really, for all intents and purposes, I think you put an and in there, for all practical purposes, right? The toolkit is complete in 2 versions. It's on the Atlas website. We've talked about it all year long. There's the shorter version on the website, and then there's a slightly longer version that's a PDF file. But once some of the spring work clears out, and hopefully this summer I'll be working on, Russ and I will be, but I'll probably, do the work of getting it on the website along with Marisa. We want to add an additional resources section, and we want to ask you, what would be valuable additional resources? What we have in mind so far is based on input from the Affinity group members. I don't know which group. Back when we asked for input, somebody said, you really don't talk about testing and placement and multiple measures very much. Could you add a section? So Russ and I talked about it, and Julie actually helped us. We wrote, it's pretty much a 1 or 1.5 page section. So we're going to add something there. We also think it's good to put some of the iBest video links. They have wonderful instructional links on co-teaching videos. It's 5 or 6 different lessons, which we think are fabulous. Could you please type in, take a moment and think about it. Do you think there are any other valuable resources, either nationally or state? I mean, should we putting links to Octave or maybe to NROC, because NROC, I'll have to ask Terry if they've got their videos publicly. They're really spending a lot of time this year on creating partnerships for transition from high school to college. Anything else, since you all know the work better than I do, you know, the actual.
So we have a Minnesota State Workforce Development. We have just created a similar toolkit for adult.
Oh, I forgot to put that. You know, I'm not in preview mode. I can't believe I got out, or in slide mode. Yes, actually, that's already being planned.
Okay, so when we get it done in the next week or two, we will send a link over. It does include some information about placement.
Yep.
A little bit more geared towards adults, but it does cover the current policies and practices in Minnesota State.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. I've been in touch with, and I'm forgetting his name, but he said the link wasn't current yet. So
Yeah, not yet. We're just finishing it.
Yeah.
This next
Should I touch base with you or him when it's
Yeah, because it's just Niebuhr and I are the primary ones doing it. You might have talked to Nick.
yeah, it was Nick, right?
Yeah, Nick's great. Nick, we're trying not to put anything on Nick because he's over his hours.
He's a consultant, right?
Yeah,
A contractor.
The
Right?
other thing,
Fantastic.
do you think something on All Learning Counts would be beneficial here?
Sure. I'll talk to Jess actually
Jess, yeah.
right after this meeting, and Jess
Okay.
is my boss and is kind of run the All Learning Counts, and we'll see what we can do. We're starting to get more of a web presence, so linking to us is a little bit easier, and that's coming up in the next couple weeks too. So,
Oh, good.
the state's improving its website quite a bit.
Okay.
Put on there.
Anything else that anyone else can think of? Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, feel free to, if anything comes to you after we move on, please type it in the chat or email us, okay? So also plan to add a chapter 5. It was in the original longer toolkit and we took it out just to kind of shorten things, but we really want to pull it out and call it documenting the partnership. And in a moment, we're going to talk about that we're going to put out, I call it an all points bulletin, where Russ and I have decided it's sort of a kind of an octopus to get our arms around that. There's some people doing anecdotal data, there's some people who have measured it, and there's so many different ways that until we can get a common data set, we figure we're just going to ask for all data. All data matters. How are you measuring it? What do you have? Whether it's anecdotal, whether it's pass rates, we're going to ask everyone who's in a partnership to send us something. So that will go into this chapter. And I've talked about seeking a Creative Commons license. That's good summer work to do. And then I'm going to talk about the study circle in a moment. But there's a companion kit to the toolkit for people who want to create a study circle in their area between ABE folks and their counterparts at the schools, how they can work through the toolkit together via a study circle, okay? And sorry if I'm not in slide mode, I do this. It's so hard for me to see, it's always my bugaboo. I can't see the slides when the floating panels are taking up half of the real estate. So anyway, if you can't, would it help if I made it bigger? Does that help a little bit? No, I'm not. Okay, anyway. So I've got the need for data, calling all partnerships to submit what you have. Russ will talk about that, although I imagine he'll be setting up some kind of a survey to collect the data, you know, what you have. Finally, we need to, or we want to submit a proposal for the Summer Institute. It's due June 1st, so we have a little bit of time. But last year, somewhere in the Affinity group, somebody mentioned, wouldn't it be great to have the real hands-on sessions there, not just at the high level? What are Russ and I doing? How is, you know, how many partnerships are there in Minnesota? How did we get there? What does the toolkit look like? But instead, things like, how are you co-teaching? what happens if students get, in your opinion, maybe if I'm saying it correctly, not exactly placed correctly, you know, how do you work with them? For those that aren't co-teaching, but you have sort of the, I'm trying to remember the school that presented at the ABE region, where they're in the school, they're co-located, but students can come to them almost any time and they have their own dedicated lab. So, I mean, there are all kinds of things that could be presented that go well beyond what Russ and I can do. So I'm asking you, if you have ideas now, to type them in, or if you think you'd like to present, because I want to reach out to people who could be interested. Even if you don't have an idea, if you're someone that we can tap on the shoulder and say, sure, we'll talk about it after, please let us know in the chat. We're not going to take a lot of time talking about it. Maybe later in the discussion, we can throw around some ideas.
So just
And-
if I could comment,
Yeah.
and Astrid, since you're online, the deadline is, I believe, June 1st. Let's make sure that we've remembered that accurately.
Yes, it is June 1st.
Okay. Then these sessions are typically 45 minutes in length. It will be virtual. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. And and so time of day usually on that day ranges from 10 till 3 in the afternoon or something like that for presentation.
Yes, I can pull up the schedule. Yeah, from 10 until about 4, I believe.
Okay, all right. So people can kind of think about that day and you look at your calendar and go, yeah, 45 minutes somewhere in there. And then there's a team, of course, who makes decisions about, accepting proposals. And that's usually known by when, Astrid?
Give me just a second, Russ. I'm looking
Okay.
that information up. I
All
think
right,
it's
thank
end
you.
of June.
Thank you. Okay,
Yes, notified by June 30th.
okay, beautiful. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and
Astrid,
it
for
looks
that.
like sessions are being held. The earlier ones are, like you said, starting around 9 or 10 o'clock and going till about 4.
Okay,
great
thank you.
question. What is the date for the Institute?
August 17th and 18th.
Okay,
And
so
I'll
one of those,
I'll put the link in the chat where you can
okay,
get the information.
great.
Although I've got this right here. There we go. Astrid, I just put the link in.
Great,
Okay.
thanks,
Good.
Leslie.
Great. So again, I really encourage people to think about it, and we'd love to know, just in case we hear from people and maybe it makes sense for you to partner or pair up with somebody, we can help facilitate that. So, okay, well, moving on, give me a second. Here we go. So the FY23 work plan. This year, the work plan is sort of cross-referenced with who's funding it. Because we for sure have 2 sources, and we might have maybe a third, depending on our application for funding to the Northwest Consortium, which I'll talk about in a later slide. But this is the 20,000, the 10 and 10 that we were talking about. And so we've noted who's funding it so that everybody can rest assured we're not double dipping. Funds are very specific from each fund, and we're committed to ensuring that not only that we do it, but we'll have to report outcomes, right? And report progress made on these. So what we have is, we've always talked about creating student and faculty testimonial short video clips on the benefits of the partnership. And we really hope to try to tackle that now that we have some funds for it. It may not be the highest professionally made video. It might be me calling upon people and setting up a Zoom meeting and recording that. But nevertheless, we think more people doing it on their own with a set of talking points. It shouldn't be that hard because the 5 partnerships that contributed to the toolkit certainly know their partnerships, and we might just say, pull out this one segment and talk about this, or pull out the segment that excites you the most. We'd like to also get some students doing that as well. And then we want to get slightly longer tutorials. I would imagine these would be about 1 to 2 minute, 2 minutes high, things people can pop in on and know the benefit of it. Now we want some short tutorials. We've talked about that. And again, we have the funding for that. And both of these, by the way, are coming from Minnesota State. We talked about creation of mentoring opportunities, but I think this is starting to morph a little bit more into the study circle notion. And we have an idea for at least one study circle. But even within that, we might want to find people within the state from ABE or the colleges who would be willing to work with other people, whether they form a study circle or they're just going to move through a partnership. Delivery of professional development webinars, we've talked about that. In addition to the affinity group, Russ and I have talked about maybe, I don't know, 3 to 5 webinars. We have to figure out what those would be. And actually, if some of you submit to the Summer Institute this year, we'd love to call on you to actually repeat that and do a webinar. And then, Russ and I have access through MDE in Minnesota State to put out announcements to a vast number of people, whether they're in the affinity group or not. And so we think it could attract more people and get them interested, and maybe even go deeper into developing. The whole idea is to promote and scale partnerships. Okay, moving on. So this is the big news, and even though it's one skinny line, it's probably the biggest, flashing light announcement. We are, in fact, going to do a half day, or maybe 2/3 of a day, DevEd ABE Partnership Symposium, and that is something that MDE was very interested in, but that'll be cost shared between both sources, MnState and MDE. We're looking at February. And we've already talked to Atlas to see if they could be available more for what I call the administration and mechanics of registration, the technology needed, and hosting the platform for it. I think we should have a small group that would help select the sessions. And I'm asking the affinity group right now if anybody has any interest in serving on that, because I don't know that we'll do an official call for proposals, because I don't know that we're going to have an elaborate set of breakout sessions and 20 sessions. It may be that we'll stay together as a whole group and just have a keynote of some kind in the morning, a kickoff session, and then maybe we have 3 sequential sessions, something like that, or 4 at the most. But in any case, if we could get maybe 3 to 4 people, if more people are interested, we'll welcome everyone. Please type your name in right now. We'll still put out a call for people to help guide this. And then Atlas, I'm sure, and maybe someone from MDE will serve on it as well. So we'll have a very robust group of people helping to give shape to this. So we're excited about it. Any questions about that before I move on? Russ, I've got, I think, about another 5 minutes, and then I need to stop, and I think I'm doing okay. Yep. Oh, I want to see names in the chat. Okay, can I pout? That's right. I don't want to pressure anyone, but we'd love to have your involvement. Okay. MDE definitely said, yes, we would love to see the affinity group continue. And so they're funding that. Russ and I would like to put out another broadcast message, maybe in August or early fall, when people are back reading their email. We could even do one now to see if there's new people who might want to join. So again, we could use those news lists or the mail lists that we have. Okay, Russ and I, again, we've done it before, but we want to make another concerted effort. We feel in this case, it's a need to meet with folks on the Minnesota State side, because there are so many ABE folks who are interested in this, but can't always get the ear of the deans. And also, more importantly, the deans have been so busy working with COVID, pivoting to distance learning, online learning, everything, that they were swamped when we were trying to talk to them. But we think this is a good time to try to facilitate some more meetings. So that's the total of 20,000. And moving to the next slide, this is what we're calling our gap funding to the Northwest region. And we presented this at their regional quarterly meeting about 2 weeks ago, I think, Russ, 3 weeks ago, for an additional. So if you notice, the Northwest region is no longer funding the body of work that we're doing. For this year, it will be Min-State and MDE. I don't know that we can get a second Min-State grant in the next year, but we can only talk about what we can do for 1 year at a time. But we did ask them for a smaller amount than we've asked in the past. And we talked to Kirsten, and Kirsten was very excited about the notion of starting a study circle as a pilot in the Northwest region. She would be involved to some degree, and I'm imagining Russ and I would probably be there for the pilot administration facilitation of it. But what we're looking at is, she talked about doing it in gap areas. So if you recall, she's got a partnership with Ralph Cox, although Ralph, I believe, is retiring soon, and that's public. I hope it is now. It's being recorded. So she may need to figure out what to do with her own partnership there. But she said, we've got some opportunities in reading, writing, and at 1 or 2 of the other campuses, because they've got 3 campuses, I believe. So she said it would be great. That's the way I think we can expand this partnership in our region, And so if I can find the people, could you help us? We'll develop, the process. I don't know if study circles the same as learning circles. I've led them when I led them when I was at Minnesota State in the system office in a couple different arenas. And you take a group of people through a process, and you give them some assignments. So they would work through the chapters of the toolkit. In between, they would go find, for example, leadership support, really assess maybe what kind of funding would be needed for upfront development of time, and start working on the curriculum. So, and how they would share it, or what that would look like. And as Kirsten said, having everybody in the same area where they would have meetings physically located together. I would probably join them, through Zoom. But anyway, she's excited about this, and we're thinking, because it's specific work to that region, we're asking for the gap funding. But Kirsten and we talked about it, this could now be replicated anywhere. The what we're calling the study circle guide would just use the toolkit. They'd have those 2 companion pieces together, and anybody nationally could kind of work on this. So they're funding that, but at the same time, we did ask MDE, this is the last slide, I believe. We asked MDE if they could fund, well, they said they had some funds, and could we put in a proposal for what we thought we could do between now and June 30th, right? We've got basically 2 months and a week. And we said, well, we want to get started on the study circles and maybe start doing the guides. So they said, sure, or yes. And then Russ and I, as I said, we want to do a concerted effort that gather all data that there is possibly out there right now. So that's 1,800. So we've got a hefty work plan, both for the next 2.5 months and for next year. And it's 2:35 now. I'm going to take a pause. I know that's a lot. Let's see, 3 new messages. Rosemary, yes, I had a feeling. Okay, good job. And Julie, thank you. Okay, that's great. So any questions, any thoughts before we move on? I hope I haven't exhausted everybody.
I'm still putting the pieces together in my head. Because
of everything that's happening.
But there's so much going on, and so everybody has to think, okay, where do I fit? What strengths do I bring to this agenda? And then where do we let the practitioners and the people who are actually doing it take the lead? And
Right.
how do we then bring together to work in an efficient way?
Right.
Well, if
Yeah.
you think of it, a lot of the work that, maybe this would help. The work that Russ and I are doing to a certain degree is promotion. I mean, I don't want to say we're big promoters, but we are advocating, if you will, on the benefits, for the benefits of partner for student success. So we're doing high level reach out, but the only areas that we're working on, I think, where we could pull practitioners in would be presentations. I mean, it's fine for them to hear what we're doing, but I think it's even better for people via presentations, right? Webinars, summer institutes, to be able to hear from the people who are actually doing the work. And it may not have to be ABE college partnerships. It could be ABE transition work, right? It could be whatever you think could be valuable to the audience. I know it's weird, but if you're in a partnership and can help us with the outcomes measures, I mean, that goes a long ways towards reinforcing the notion that these partnerships work. So through the advocacy work, Rosemarie, we need help from the field to further scale and expand partnerships. Does it come full cycle, if you see what I mean?
Right, but then also there's, what do people want? You know, we can provide a whole lot of things, but you know, in adult education, we're bottom up. So how can we respond to requests also as people go into these partnerships? What resources, what do they want, particularly in terms of professional development? I mean, I've been working in this field for 42 years now, and it's changed so dramatically. And you think, okay, we're moving into a new era, but what are the requests? What do people really want to know in terms of their professional development as we go through and get to these goals? What is it that they most need? Apart from, of course, obvious funding, but you know, in terms of,
Well, if you look
how
at the
to-
next slide, and Russ is going to
Well, I was gonna
facilitate.
say it's a
Look
great
at-
segue,
Yeah,
Rosemary.
great segue.
Yeah, you've cued it perfectly, and it's almost as if, you know, you were my confederate who was, you know, going to set this up for me. So I thank you so much. But yeah, there's a few things we want to talk about, and let's just go to that, Rosemary, since it's fresh of mind for everybody, and that's the, you know, professional development desired for next year. And I will say there's a number of avenues for that.
Here.
We have,
I'm going to stop sharing, Russ, just so you can
okay,
see
good.
everybody, okay?
Oh, that's great. This is
Yeah.
great. So folks, feel free to put on your camera if you'd like. It's always nice if you can to do that so we can see everyone in the room. If you prefer not to, that's your choice. We respect that. But when we think about professional development, there is this notion of, well, what do we need maybe within the affinity group? Then there's also this professional development experience in which we have others out there who can benefit from the toolkit, that can benefit from instances of partnership, that can benefit from co-teaching experiences where people are having success doing that. So when I looked at the webinar ideas, I looked at the symposium. These are a couple of venues, for instance, where professional development can occur, right? But also within the affinity group itself, if we have 4 or 5 sessions again next year, we know that almost all of them can be dedicated, if we wish, to some type of sharing experience, right? So folks, what are you thinking? We'd love to hear from you about, okay, we've evolved to this point. What now should we be learning together or helping convey to others? so that they can have effective, enjoy effective relationships. So just open it up.
Russ, this is Rick and South Central College. So I think, I'm thinking about this particularly, my position as dean, looking forward. And of course, we've got these deliverables coming down the pipeline right now. Biggest one is this whole thing with math pathways. And so for fall 23, basically, we need to have in place the math. We've got the 3 tracks, right? We need to have in place the track for statistics and then for algebra, which basically you have the co-requisite along with the gateway, the 100 level course. And so what we've been working through with our AB partners here, particularly at Mankato with Karen Walters' group, is thinking about that handoff, because as part of that, of course, is that whole thing that if they're doing the algebra track, they need to be completely through it in 1 year, 2 semesters. If they're doing the statistics track, 1 semester. So really what we've been working on the front end is that also that multiple measures piece, so that we get these students placed appropriately. And then do they come directly into South Central, into one of our math tracks, or do we need to do the pre-college with them to get up to speed? And so we're working through that whole handoff thing and then building it into our advising platform right up front. And so I think that's one, even though we've covered a lot on math pathways already with the presentations, these are sort of the next steps to operationalize it. So that may be something that, since that's a Min statewide initiative, that may be something we can all benefit from, to have that discussion further in the coming year.
Yeah, I was wondering too, Rick, the symposium that we're looking at is in February. And so it's conceivable that that topic, some additional progress will have been made, or certainly needs to be made, in time for coursework to be put into catalogs and advertised. What time of year is that typically where schools are doing that process?
We're, I think everybody's a little different, but for us, we're working on the co-requisites right now for statistics, for the statistics track and for the algebra track. We'll have those. We have to get them submitted to our curriculum process no later than November of next fall. And then that will assure that they're listed in the catalog, in the spring catalog. And so we already have the course numbers assigned and everything for them. And then the other thing we're piloting right now this fall, actually, we're doing the math pre-college here on campus with ABE. They'll actually have a classroom here. And we've done this with ESL before. So we're going to do it with math also, and get 1 year ahead of it to pilot that piece of it. And that'll be one of our ABE co-instructors will be teaching that course. So I would hope by February, we've got all of our ducks in a row, that we could say, okay, we feel pretty confident we're ready to go live with this for fall 23, because that's when those 2 tracks need to be in place and being delivered. And then I see one of my partners in crime here now. She's my lower left-hand corner. So speak up if you want to, Rebecca, please.
I can't think of anything to add to what you're saying. So I'm, just trying to figure out how to pilot all the things.
Right. So the question I have is, to what degree is there sort of, because there are so many math pathway campuses, to what degree are folks expected to just go about this on their own, and sort of, or is there a bit of recipe that people are following in which you're learning professionally together about how to operationalize this?
There is a bit of a recipe on it. I'll say it's a
Yeah.
framework. It's kind of like grandma's recipe, right? Here's the general ingredients, a pinch of this, a pinch of that. Yeah, so it's kind of like that. But
Right.
and it did fall apart a little bit at the beginning because the folks from let's see, University of Texas, the Dana Center, they facilitated the first 1 or 2 meetings, but then for whatever reason at the Min-State level, that bogged down. So we have continued to have the quarterly meetings among the participating Min-State colleges to learn from each other. But what we get on the Min-State system level office end is really, here are the outcomes. Here's the benchmarks you have to hit, not necessarily so much how you
Do it.
means to get there.
Yeah.
Could I ask, Rick, are all Min-State campuses that are implementing these math pathways, they're all on their own timeline? And would you say you're kind of ahead of the curve? Or like if we did something in February, would that be ahead or behind the curve?
The Min-State set down the following markers. They set down the marker to have the track for the algebra track and the statistics track to go live fall of 23. Now they have fudged on that a little bit, given that the things with the Dana Center facilitating it didn't go as planned. So they asked all of us what we, did we need to revise our timelines? Could we still hit that fall 23 original deadline, that original benchmark? And we were one of those that said we thought we could still hit the original benchmark for statistics and algebra. The third track is the technical math track, and that one will come probably a year later.
Math track. Okay. So that's got a little more time.
Was
It
the,
does.
I have a question, if I could. I'm sorry, Larry,
go ahead.
maybe as a follow-up to Russ's. So if you're bringing it up to this group, it sounds like there's not a body of people who can come together to talk about these things. Did I get that right? I was also multitasking in the chat at the same time.
Well, if you're asking if there's people who could present on it, yes, because
No, not present. You talked about, we'd love to be able to talk about these things, about the handoff
Right.
and get some
I
ideas.
think the one thing for us, the thing that each college is doing on its own, and this does come out in the discussions we meet quarterly with the other colleges, although part of that is also about pedagogy, how you
Right.
create the co-rec classes and everything. But I think the real the partnership with our ABE partners has really happened on the ground at each college level. Now we talk a little bit about what's going on, but that's really been because the relationship between, as probably all of you know, between ABE and the partner college may be somewhat different across the system. So how they're working through that, I think there's probably going to be a number of variations for that.
Okay.
And that doesn't get as
Yeah.
discussed as much. Yeah.
So I'm trying to capture ideas for next year. It could be appropriate for this affinity group, or even in some of the webinars maybe, to precisely talk about how are they partnering specifically for math pathways. And we
I think
wouldn't be stepping on any toes with
No.
Min-State. I just want to make sure.
no.
And
If we
maybe
were
that's
to,
what Larry was going to jump in.
yeah, if we were to focus on the relationship, the partnership between ABE and the colleges, and that component of the math pathways, that would be really right up our venue for this group, because the Min-State group has been focusing more on the pedagogy side of it, and so it hasn't been what we've been talking about here.
It
Do
seems.
you think it would be worth a Summer Institute panel discussion?
It
Or is that
could be.
premature?
It certainly could be. It might maybe think about it 1, 2, maybe a Summer Institute panel, and then with a follow-up in February, you can look at it that way, kind of a part 1, part 2.
Oh, okay.
Because because the things we're doing, for example, as I'm looking over at Rebecca here from our Mankato AB partners, we're piloting some of these things for the first time this fall. So the pre-college math is being piloted for the first time this fall, and we'll learn a little bit from that, because part of it is also the advising side of it. These students are doing guided self-placement as part of the advising, and then capture them and get them directed into the right level of math that they need. And so again, that could be something, those could be the parts really particularly for this group that we could talk about.
It seems that you have a great opportunity to share assets, and that's what the technology does for you, because you're working towards the same goal. You're bringing different skills, and you've got your own assets, but those assets can be shared between the various groups that are trying essentially to do the same thing. And
right.
Technology makes that instant sharing, and what you've got to be careful about is we tend to get a little bit proprietary about some of these things. And so
we don't have any secrets, trust me.
No, okay. But sharing, it seems to me that I've seen so many ABE and vocational instructors, and somehow they put so much effort into adapting their own methods and developing all of these techniques and having these assets. And if we could share, that would make it so much easier.
I think what we've been using here all along these past 2 years, we have a dev ed team, which is composed of our ABE partners and then South Central College. And we also pull in people from our advising group here at South Central who are part of that, likewise, our advisors and admissions people. And it's been almost what I would like to think of if we're in Silicon Valley, we call it fail fast, learn, and go on to the next iteration.
Yeah.
So that's really what we've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the agile methodology.
Mm-hmm.
So quick question, Rick, now just to share with you, the Summer Institute is largely made up of adult basic education professionals coming together. And so what they're going to be looking for is, I think, is the fact that Math Pathways even exists
Mm-hmm.
on a campus, and then some advice about how could they, if they're not already engaged in some way, how could they become engaged, right?
Right.
And you're thinking about this because you already have a relationship. You and Karen have already thought about it. You've done some things, and this is a natural evolution for you to be able to think about it in this way about, oh, there's this new initiative. We got to make something good happen. And in order to do that, we're going to collaboratively approach the work.
Yeah.
I think that's meaningful for people, but at the same time, I think there's going to be this hunger for, well, I'd love to get in on that, but there seems to be a closed door to that, or how do I open that door?
I mean, we could certainly talk about it. I want to make sure I have Karen and I have Rebecca as part of that if we're going to do something at this in August.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, Russ, I'll talk to you about it after. I'm thinking about how could you approach it from both ends, which is those already doing it. Here are all of their questions, and you make the abstract, and then we could do some reaching out to all of our ABE folks and say, for any of you who are already working in Math Pathways, you should know about this session.
Right.
Hear how people are struggling with it. But but then in the abstract, but if you haven't or don't know, well, so we could do the both end. Here's how you can think about forging that. So
okay. That's great.
Rick, great ideas. Wow, exciting.
Yeah, that's fabulous. So if we could go back to the list, I know that one of them had to do with Math Pathways and getting a sense of where we were at with Math Pathways. The other had to do with the DESR presentation. Rick, from your standpoint and anyone else, let's see, who else is from our colleges? If you could just raise your hand, either electronically or physically. It's just a question of, is this really the new DSR? This is one of them, one of the sort of outcomes of DESR. What is going to happen with DSR going forward? I don't know if I'm clear about that.
No, I think you are in part, and I didn't get to the chat question here that was maybe tied to that, but
Yeah,
it basically, so DESR really had a part one, okay, DESR 1.0, there you go, with these
Right.
21st century discussions here. 1.0 culminated last fall. And so we did our final reports to the system office, and we've
Right.
been working through actually the implementation for 2 years. And so during that period in time, we worked through, working to streamline dev ed, to get all of our classes out there that we all offered, and to make sure that they basically cross-listed with each other across the system. And then I don't know how many but we were certainly one of those. I know there were a number of others who also, we developed like our block classes. So we now have an English reading 8 credit hour block class that the students get through in 1 semester. Because the next thing we were told was coming down the pipeline is this whole thing of making it accelerated, right? To move the students through more quickly. And that's
Right.
really where Math Pathways comes through.
That's
And,
one of the, yeah.
And the next shoe to drop in the whole process will be, because I was just corresponding on this today with the system office, is the English as a second language. That will be the next one, and they're going to start meeting this coming fall. And my assumption is coming out of that will be something along the lines of the Math Pathway model that we've been talking about. They'll be using that model. So these things basically, with the co-recs and further development of block classes, are what I'll call DESR 2.0.
Okay. Yeah. And so really, maybe our symposium, to a degree, has an opportunity for people to kind of understand these shoes that are dropping, because I see a shoe drop as an opportunity to say, there's something that's coming that's part of the plan, that's an extension of the plan strategically. And so where is the opportunity for partnership that exists as before the shoe drops? And then, as the shoe drops, what now are we going to operationalize potentially together?
Yep, good points.
Yep.
Could I just ask, who at the system office has been like working on this? Because I think that's a good idea, Russ, that like the Dana Center has been working for years on these math pathways. And now it's finally rolling out in Minnesota. And so who's coordinating that at the system office? And I'm also, when you talk about these block and credit hours and the acceleration, like even maybe just getting some system office people to present on their ideas around it, because there's been a lot of work in adult basic education as well around those ideas. They haven't moved very far though, because we really rely on our partnership to do that. So
This fits under Corinne's purview.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Good to know, Larry.
I'd
Thank
be
you.
happy to have a conversation with her if you want to, Julie, because I work with her on quite a few things that cross over. So if you want to, we can do that.
I think that'd be up to Russ and Leslie if they would be interested in doing that
I
as
did,
well.
or if you wanted to separately also.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Yeah. I understand.
Corinne did present, and she talked about the work that not only are they doing, but where they're heading. It might be worth it for us, Russ, just to go back and review that recording. But Julie, if you were asking about math pathways, that's in a different section. That's not Corinne. They kind of work to get right, because that was Nicole. Was that, we worked with Nicole on that, Larry.
Nicole's is usually the program manager, so she works with project management, but then Corinne is overseeing that area. She's the
Oh,
P20.
I didn't know she was over. Okay, good.
She's
Okay.
P20 now, so that was Greg's job. Greg went to St. Paul, and now Satasha is moving up to Ron's position. So,
All right.
so we'll have a bit of change there. But Corinne is technically interim, but I think she's sticking around.
Okay, that's good to
And
know.
Julie, just again, because I'm taking notes, when you said what ideas do they have, just could you hone that in a little bit more? Are you talking about for forming partnerships? Are you talking about for college readiness? I just want to be really clear.
Well, I guess and maybe all the ABE Minnesota State partnerships already know this, but what's the evidence-based or the research practices around this that kind of show that this is the model we should be moving to, and
For
how will
what?
it
But for
work
what?
for math pathways? Like,
For
why
math
is it
pathways,
better? Yeah,
okay.
why are we getting rid of this college algebra for all? Everyone's got to pass algebra. And what, how does that help adult basic education learners transition into college, I guess is what I was trying to emphasize or think about there. And also I think Rick mentioned block, which I'm not totally, the terminology you're using, I'm not necessarily familiar with that, but I know they're trying to shorten the dev ed, developmental education amount. Like, no one's going to be taking more than, I think, a year of it. But some of those terms, I don't know if all these partnerships are familiar with those different pieces. And maybe they are, and I don't know if that's important for this group either. That's up to more like other people who are doing this work to decide.
Yeah, I mean, this is just my side sort of view of this, and that is that if the colleges are moving in these fundamental new directions as it relates to math pathways, and they're interested in student success to move through the pathway in the most expedient fashion as possible. What I'm hearing from Rick is that they've made some determinations there that adult basic education is a partner to achieve that outcome, right? And am I right, Rick? I mean, that's what I've heard.
That's correct. It certainly is the whole thing we've been doing the last 2 years is based on that. So we have for example, Rebecca is a co-instructor, Dev Ed math instructor right in our classrooms. So that's part of the model, because a block course basically is where you take, like, say you have a lower level and a higher level class that would have been each one standalone 16 weeks. You put them into a single 16-week class where you're doing each one in 8 weeks now. It's a compressed format. And so to move through that expeditiously, but also make sure the students are getting the additional hands-on learning, that's really where our instructor and our ABE co-instructor work in partnership with these students to help keep moving them along, and also that they don't fall behind.
So a couple of things. One of the people dealing with guided pathways in some forms was Shelley Aldrich, and she passed away. So we're working to get someone into that position. I just got a note from Paul Shepard about that, so I wanted to mention it. Quick question, Rick. And sorry if I just wanted to check in. Was the Dana a logistical problem, or was it sensitive? If just say sensitive if you can't say anything about it.
I think there was some sensitivity to it. Yes. Yeah.
There's been some pushback from some faculty. Some faculty love it. Some faculty hate it. So that's been some of the concern there. I don't know specific to that, but I was curious because of that, and leave it at that. But the other thing I was going to say is that a big part of this, and Paul might be part of this, is reaching out to the advisors, because too often, if they're not fully kind of brought on board for these things, the students never fully find out what's going on. And so there's some of that that's happening at the Teach Together Minnesota this year, but more of that would be really helpful. And if we could get some advisors involved in the conference you're talking about, that would be a great help, I think, to moving it forward. So if it's okay, I'd like to mention that to Paul, because I think from looks of this email, I'll be meeting with him soon.
Julie, you asked the question, you asked about algebra, particularly. Developmental ed should be a pathway to help students successfully get into their college degrees and qualifications and get to the place they want to go. What I'm concerned about is it shouldn't be a hurdle that people have to jump over. And so I think we have to think very carefully as we select the courses and select where people are coming from and where they want to go and what the end goal is, that what we try and do is facilitate that as much as possible and not do what in some places are happening in the United States, where community colleges, two-year colleges, and even some four-year are using stat and math as a way of sort of discouraging people who really aren't qualified to continue on, and they're cooling them out. And so I'm always very sensitive to those sorts of issues too.
Well,
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Rosemarie, that what I heard in the presentation from Math Pathways people was just this, we're assessing where students' intended pathway is. It could change, we recognize, but the notion is what's the appropriate type of math that they should be learning for the prize they have in mind, the career prize they have in mind, or that degree program they have in mind, and then customizing that track for them with the more appropriate level of math skill development that they need.
Okay.
That's a pretty big fundamental way of describing it, but that's what I heard.
the
But
problem,
I love this.
You read my mind. You read
Yes.
my mind, Russ.
the problem in the system has been, we recommend generally algebra to everyone, even if they don't need it, because that gives them the most options. Well, it also tends to limit those people. And so the idea of pathways is to not force everyone into the pathway of algebra from, back when we were fighting the Cold War in the 50s. This is the idea that we're going to hit statistics, tech math especially, and levels. And they'll still know some algebra from high school, but what we need to do is change. Not everyone needs college algebra. And so that'll go to tech math, stats, algebra for STEM, and a couple other options. So that's the basic idea behind it. And we just do too much algebra. There's just not that much need. I mean, I love algebra and I'm weird, but
Yeah, I love algebra too, but then I spent 5 years sort of teaching undergraduates, and so I teach them strategies for teaching adults and different things. And so you always ask them, okay, what motivates you? And you get into motivation, right? And the biggest thing that came out in terms of motivation was being able to find things that are going to be useful to me, that I can see a use for as I go through college and then I get into the workforce. And I know it was a very utilitarian way to look at things, but that message kept on coming back to me.
All right, thanks, Rosemarie. Now we're at 1:10. I'm doing a time check. And Leslie, do you have any wrap-up things that we need to put some time toward? Or is there anything else with our discussion topics that we need to still get on the table here?
Well, I'm just looking at them again. We did the math pathways and DESR. And the second one is calling all partnership data. And then the Summer Institute proposal ideas, which we talked about, and then also ideas for professional development. And Belinda had put one in the chat, and we've been having a behind the scenes chat just to clarify. And so I've got an idea for some sessions there, but that's also more professional development. It's really the specifics about how the two teachers work together to develop curriculum, in a co-teaching environment. That seems to be the need,
Pretty fundamental.
It is,
know,
right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, it's all around the co-teaching model. No, I think we've covered it all. And I think the only other question would be, as we continue next year, we've got ideas, for, I guess, ideas to talk about, particularly math pathways and some other things, but anything else that comes to people's minds. I mean, we always want to make sure that we're hitting the mark in terms of meeting your need for attending. And 15 of you are here today, and we expect probably the same number at meeting number 2. There's been a bit of a decline down from the high numbers at the beginning of the year, I noticed. And I always say groups do tend to kind of whittle down to those who keep having, sorry, my cat decided to make her presence, but say hello, Theo. Anyway, if there are any additional ideas for how we can continue to engage you next year, we try to do a balance between discussion, large group, breakout groups, presentations, I'm sure Russ will send out an evaluation form, but if you have any other thoughts in the remaining two minutes or so, 3 minutes, have at it. And then of course, we'll bid you adieu for the summer.
Well, I just want to say how great this has been to be gathered with you. And I just know that it's challenging. It's challenging for us to be in the same space. It's empowering, but it's challenging because you may be a faculty member in the math area. And now we're not talking about that, right? Excuse me. Or you might be a dean who's brand new to this, and maybe you're like, I'm super excited to be here because I'm just taking it all in. But we recognize that we have a lot of different constituents out there who are connected to this. And so my sense of when you have drop off is sometimes it's that this particular meeting maybe just doesn't meet my needs in comparison to other priorities I have. But we'll continue to have our sites where this stuff exists. We'll continue to have some gathering points. We'll continue to have some discussion stuff like this. And yes, we will use a survey to sort of try to get from the larger field, especially those not here, to get their input. That's the best we can hope for. We're delighted you showed up, right? And you've spent the time to share your thoughts and ideas, and we're eternally grateful for that. So watch for some information. It'll also include like we did this year where we said, what days of the week? It seems to me that our Friday morning time has been a good time at about 10 o'clock. This has been a pretty good gathering point on Thursday afternoons. Maybe it's going to be a question of, are those still the best times for us to gather? And if not, or would you like to suggest something else, right? And give people a few choices. But I think that's the other challenge, right? Is when we gather. But the good news is we record these, we make them available, they're out there. We suspect people are getting value out of them. All right. So Leslie, are we ready to wrap it up?
We
Wish them
are.
all a happy summer. Stay
Yes.
connected.
Stay
We'll
healthy.
be in touch. Stay healthy. And whatever you can do to improve the earth, go do it. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. You bet.